The final Bourbon related component that we're going to look at is refills. Refills are a little bit different than Bourbon, Neat, and Bitters in that there isn't anything to install. They are components that are already built out that use Bourbon and Neat, and they're just ready for you to use and plug right into your projects. Here's the Refills website, and it lets you know that they're components and patterns that are built with Bourbon and Neat. It does let you know that it does require the latest version of Bourbon and the latest version of Neat. And then here it has all of these examples. So one of the examples would be accordion tabs, or this is another set of tabs. And these are these little kind of like cards that you might use. So these are all components that you might want to incorporate into your project. Here's a menu bar. And there's lots of things that are used on their website. I have found that some of these have a few errors in them. This happens to be one of them. So you'll have to try these and see if they work for your needs. But most of them work just fine. This is a Flexbox pattern that you can use. So you can just plug this into your project and then change the code. In addition to these patterns, they also have components. So their components are like an accordion set, or a fade in, fade out animation, or badges, or breadcrumbs, or button groups. There's all sorts of things for you to explore here. They also have type systems that you can just use and plug right into your project. So let me show you how this works by using it in one of my projects. I have a new project that I'm working on right here, and this project is just a blank index page. This is pretty much what the index page looks like. I have an empty CSS folder, and then I have a SASS folder with our basic structure. I've already set up Terminal to be watching this folder, so I'm ready to start developing. Here is my index page. So as you can see, all I have is a section tag and a div with a class of wrapper, and I just made these previously, so I'm ready to actually insert some content into my page. I'm going to get rid of my footer because I'll use the components to create the footer. I also want to point out to you that in my main.sass, I'm pointing to these various elements that we've been using throughout the course. We are going to want to make sure that we're pulling in our plugins. I am not going to use anything from modules or layouts. Currently, I have some formatting that I've already specified for the layout. So what I'm going to do for this project is in my main.sass is I'm just going to comment out the layouts just so you can see how refills works without anything else. I do have some global settings that I've set, and this is my reset file. So that is something that I'll currently keep in my project. And then obviously in my plugins folder, I've already installed Bourbon and Neat, and it's important that I'm pulling those into my project because the files that we're going to be using are dependent on this. Now, the other thing that I want to point out to you is just like all of the Bourbon, Neat, and Bitters components that we've been looking at, Refills is using SASS CSS. So if we look at any of these elements and look at the code, you can see that it's going to let you know, like, here's the HTML that you need, here is your SCSS, and sometimes you'll need to get some JavaScript as well. Because the code that it's providing to us is already formatted in SCSS, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make an SCSS file rather than using my SASS file. So what I'll do is I'll copy this code right here. I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call it main.scss, and I'm going to save it in my SASS folder. Then I'm going to paste in this code. Now this code, remember, is SASS. So to convert this code to SASS CSS, I just need to include my semicolons. So it can still pull in my SASS partials, but I do need to use the syntax for SASS CSS. I'll save this file, and I'm just going to close my main.css. My index page is currently looking for a file called main.css, which is located in the CSS folder. And as I've mentioned, it is important in this case to make sure that you're watching the appropriate file. So I'm already set up, but I'm just going to do it again so I can show you. I'm going to go into my SASS file. I'm going to look for the sassy CSS, and then I'm going to have this write to the CSS folder and convert to my main.css. So SASS is now watching for changes and I'm ready to go. Now that we've done that, let's go ahead and build some components onto the page. So let's just scroll down into the components, and I'm going to show you how we can incorporate this into our project. Let's say that I wanted to use these flex boxes in my project. I'm going to go ahead and click Show Code, and it's going to give me a section with HTML and sassy CSS and possibly JavaScript. I will copy all of the HTML code. I'm going to go into my file, and I like to make some comments here, so I'm just going to say Flexbox. And then I'm going to paste in the code, and I'll just indent my code to make it a little bit easier to read. And then I'm going to say end Flexbox down here. You don't need the comments, but I just like to do it because it keeps things a little bit more organized. Now I'm going to go back to refills, and I'm going to copy all of the sassy CSS. We'll go into our main.sassy CSS. And again, I just like to make a comment here, so I'm just going to say Flexbox section, and I'm going to paste in all of this code, and we'll save our page right here. And if we go back to the web and refresh our web page, you can see that I now have this Flexbox container, and it works just like it did in the refills website. And of course, I can go into the HTML and I can start making changes here. So if I wanted to say all about fish, and I want to replace the copy and the picture, or whatever it is that I wanted to do, then I can just save my file, and if we refresh, you can see that now it says all about fish. So I can just use this as a starting point. I can replace the HTML with my own HTML and build something. Let's just put a couple more things into our page. I'm going to go up here and let's grab one of these type systems. So the type systems, you can see they're just articles and they're styled different ways. So this is the slab serif example, and here is a more sans serif example, and here's another sans serif example. So you can just kind of scroll through these and find the one that's going to work the right way for your project. So I'm going to just grab this one right here, and I'm going to show the code. And I'm going to grab the HTML. Now you'll notice that this one does have a head section, so it actually is giving me 2 linked tags. So, you'll want to look at the code so that you're not getting things that you don't need or copying things in the wrong place. So it is linking out to Google Fonts. So I'll copy that. I'm going to put that in my head section, and I'll load that before I load my CSS. Then I'm going to go back out to the web, and I'm going to grab the text that's in the article tag, and down here we'll just make a comment that says article section, and I'll paste this code in. I do have some red text here, and it looks like there's a closing A tag that doesn't have a matching opening A tag, so I'm just going to get rid of that. I don't know what that's all about, but obviously check the code. We'll save our HTML, and just really quickly, if I show you my page right now, we have our Flexbox components, and if I scroll down, you can see that here's the article. It doesn't look the same because I haven't loaded the sassy CSS. So let's go back and let's grab the SASS that Refills is providing to us. I'm going to copy that. I'll come back into my main.sassy CSS. And again, I'm just going to make a comment that says article section. And then I'm going to paste this code in. And I'll save. And if we refresh our page, you can see that I'm getting a error. There's something to do with the mixin. And sometimes you'll find these sorts of problems. So it looks like that's looking for a mixin called medium screen, which we don't have. Now we are loading Neat, so I'm not sure if this is an incompatibility with this version or what the problem is. This might be pointing to like an older version of Neat or something like that. But I'm just gonna, for right now anyways, take out line 145. It looks like it has to change the font size, so it has something to do with making it responsive. But let's just try eliminating that for right now. So I'm just gonna get rid of this mix and call. We'll save this and let's try to refresh. And it looks like there's another one at line 153. So obviously this isn't perfect. I mean, there are some issues, and especially because it's free, it's, maybe not completely maintained. I know that they do have a couple, as I mentioned, incompatibilities with some of the other versions. So you may have to do a little work to get it to actually, work correctly. But I removed those, and you can see that this is what it looks like. It's now taking on that formatting. I didn't really have to do that much to get it to work correctly. The page is responsive, so if I make my page more narrow, you can see how nicely these flex boxes work. They all go to one column, and my article still looks great. And that's pretty much how you can work with refills. So you'll have to go through the various areas and make sure that everything works. As I mentioned, some of the patterns aren't completely compatible, but you'll figure it out. I think that you'll find refills to be a helpful starting point for some of your projects. It might not be right for all of your projects, but you might find it to be useful. My one warning that I have for you is when you do use refills, I've found that it tends to create some repetitive code. Because you're grabbing these components, you might be redefining things multiple times, and that can be a little bit problematic. So if you do use refills, I would encourage you to really take the time to look through the code and optimize it so that you're not adding a bunch of extra stuff that you may or may not need.